17:32 GMT, BizAfrica starts in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Its economy is expected to hit double-digit growth by early 2014. That's a full year earlier than projected by the International Monetary Fund. And that's according to new government data, which also suggests that the economy will grow at more than 8% this year. That's off the back of a boom in the mining sector and improvements in governance. President Joseph Kabila's government, however, does accept that it needs to do a lot more to stamp out corruption. The DRC has some of the world's largest reserves of copper and cobalt, as well as rich deposits of coltan, tin and diamonds. It also has vast and as yet untapped reserves of hydroelectric power. On the other side of the continent, Uganda's president is pushing his peers in East Africa to remove all barriers to trade among the 5 East African states. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni says countries in the region are dragging their feet in implementing a common market protocol, and that in turn is retarding their collective economic growth. With the details from Kampala, here's CCTV's Isabel Nakiria.
In his address to members of the East African Parliament and ministers now sitting here in Kampala, Chairman of the EAC Yoweri Museveni noted that all non-tariff barriers should be scrapped to enable free flow of trade within the region.
Fully implement the treaty by removing all the non-tariff barriers. The people in Kenya are always creating obstacles. I don't know why those officials. They are like the ones here, they are all blind. They don't know where it is. But we are working on it, and President Kenyatta is very, very active. We are going to sort out that issue.
The East African countries signed a common market protocol 3 years ago, but the desired levels of free movement of people and goods are still not being attained. Countries in the region still charge taxes on goods crossing borders. An East African passport has not yet been implemented, while work permits are still charged in the region. Among the bills that members of the East African Parliament have not approved is the One Border Stop Bill, which was passed last year. If assented to as law, the bill will facilitate trade and movement of people within the community. Border control officers will be required to only verify goods crossing border points and not ask for passports. Museveni told the East African members of parliament to embark on sensitizing the region on the benefits of a free trade zone to enable economic growth.
You'll find that in the end you will have a very big influence. You should use the powers granted to you by the East African Community Treaty to push for further integration of East African community.
But critics say Museveni and other East African leaders have not made enough progress and are not bringing their populations with them in their desires for greater integration. Museveni tasked member states to embark on a master plan to have infrastructure like railway systems, road networks and waterways in the region rehabilitated. The chairman of the EAC summit said with free flow of goods and services in the region, a political integration is possible. Member states are yet to achieve the East African Monetary Union, which they expect to sign in November this year. According to the EAC chairperson Yoweri Museveni, the time to unite is now. And if the region is to attain an economic and political integration, then all resources, including the recently discovered oil and gas, must be used properly and accounted for. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
While the East African Legislative Assembly is meeting in Kampala to discuss the EAC Vehicle Load Control Bill of 2012, that's a proposed law that seeks to reduce cases of overloading in the region's road network. Further up north, Egypt is grappling with similar problems. Now, proper legislation on maximum vehicle weight is seen as part of the solution to the numerous problems of road maintenance across many African countries. CCTV's Yasser Kim looks at a problem which, in Egypt, is blamed for causing one of the highest rates of accidents and road fatalities in the world.
Egypt loses about 12,000 lives from road accidents every year. According to WHO figures, there is a traffic fatality rate of 42 deaths per 100,000, one of the highest in the world. The irony is that Egypt has strict laws concerning speed, blood alcohol concentration, seat belts and load control. The problem is they're only on paper, not well enforced.
The cost of road crashes account for 2.5 to 3% of GDP. That is a huge economic impact because the police force is not able to implement the law and regulations in the crowded and chaotic streets. The EU studied our regulations and found that it is compatible with the most developed nations, with a few exceptions in the law.
One of the exceptions is overloading on roads, especially from trucks and buses. This was one of the main elements of the National Road Safety Program launched in 2009. It placed various restrictions and controls on the load of heavy trucks on the roads.
The law restricted load on every truck or bus that should not be exceeded, or it will pay a fine and suspend the license. Also, no trailer would be allowed in the country, only small trucks at certain times, mainly at night.
Truck and bus drivers blocked roads and went into strike when the law was announced in 2010, prompting the government to postpone implementation. Then it was totally scrapped after the revolution, as politicians became preoccupied with the unrest in the country. The end result is that security concerns still exist, while analysts expect more accidents and more facilities unless the traffic laws are strictly implemented. This is Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
Air route liberalization is a pretty sensitive issue in Africa. Now, it's something that other regions and continents have dealt with in different ways, of course, in a fairly different note to the Open Skies Agreement. At a recent conference, however, airlines on the continent debated what further liberalization of Africa's airways could mean for their bottom line. CCTV's Angela Coppola was there.
In fact, there is an agreement going back a decade that African countries signed, signaling their intent to liberalize the airways and air channels in Africa. It's not been implemented. Despite this, the air travel sector is growing.
And we've seen direct investment by China here in Africa. We're starting to see that generating air cargo. And also passenger travel is doing very well in Africa, much better than the global average. Again, particularly with Asia, but also with the Middle East.
The big challenges facing Africa are fairly obvious. Consider that it takes no less than 3 flight changes to get from South Africa to the Central African Republic. The reasons are apparent to some operators.
The issue, like I mentioned, is that national carriers that are giving distorted information to the leadership, and I think more and more the leaders are realizing that they should not be looking too narrowly. They should look, have a broader vision.
IATA's Brian Pierce takes a slightly different, less controversial view.
I think it's commercial freedom. I think we're still seeing, too much interference from government in many ways. There are still too few services that are able to fly across the continent and within because of regulatory restrictions, and also people want the infrastructure that is useful for customers, for passengers, for shippers. And I think we need to see better consultation on the construction of infrastructure and the use of infrastructure.
Despite the lack of continental government implementation, the passenger segment of the airline industry in Africa has grown by 7%, while the global average is just 4%. The same applies to the cargo business. Mergers and acquisitions have been touted as a solution to regional airline cooperation on the continent, but they're fraught with regulatory challenges. Perhaps it's time for governments to get out of the way and allow those airlines to get on with business. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Cape Town.
We're fast closing on 17:45 GMT. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Modernising transport. We'll be checking in on progress in building Africa's largest and so far most ambitious urban transport project.
Africa, an amazing world, is coming closer to us. A new voice.
We have made an excellent beginning.
A new view. Let's watch together. We deliver news and views. Let's explore together. We get you inside real Africa. Every day, only on CCTV News. BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back. With funding from Chinese banks, Ethiopia is now building a light rail network in its capital, Addis Ababa. Once complete, that network should cover about 70 kilometers right across the city, over which an estimated 60,000 passengers will be moving every single hour. Now, that project is due to go online in 2015. CCTV's Gurum Chala was at the construction site. He filed this report.
Much is anticipated out of this light railway construction in the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Being the first of its kind in the country, the construction that is involving millions of dollars will serve 60,000 people at a time in 1 hour in all service directions. This will take the burden of Addis Ababa's transport problem away once and for all.
For a city of such a population, there needs to be a mass transport that is capable of transporting around 15,000 passengers in one direction in 1 hour.
This city railway construction is being undertaken into 2 phases. The first phase, that is around 34 kilometers, is more than 20% completed, and the second phase will also be started after 2015. The project is mainly funded by Chinese banks. Furthermore, as a sign of wonderful Sino-Ethiopian cooperation in investment, the China-based China Railway Engineering Corporation, CREC, is handling the execution of the project hand in hand with the Ethiopian Railway Corporation.
We think this project is very different because we have adopted the Chinese standard for this project, and we think it is going to contribute a lot of China-Ethiopia trade and friendship.
Our project, the LRT project, has 2 phases right now, and the first phase is the one which is under construction right now by Chinese government, Chinese contractors, and our aim and our plan is to construct the phase 2 by ourselves, all in all, the civil works and the rest as well.
After the completion of these almost 70 kilometers of city railway construction, the city will absolutely have a new appearance. Although trains are the oldest means of mass transportation in the world and are not new for Ethiopia, they are the best choice at the moment by the government and the public with their expected performance in town.
The relationship that we have with China on this project is commercial. It's development oriented. It's a development partnership direction.
When completed in 2015, the light rail train of Addis Ababa will have a total of 41 cars, each with the capacity of carrying 286 passengers at a time. This will enable the light rail train to provide transportation to 15,000 people an hour in one direction and 60,000 in all 4 directions.
At this very moment, Ethiopia is investing billions of dollars in its mega projects all across the country. These mega projects are also providing job opportunities and helping the economy to stimulate for further growth in the future. Grumjala, CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Various African governments are currently reviewing their laws and regulations on taxes and ownership in the oil industry and other mining sectors as well. Now, for some, that review is being carried out with the help of the World Bank in consultations with energy and petroleum ministries and other stakeholders in the oil and gas industry. Now, if you take all of them together, they're expected to develop policies that will straddle that fine line between making a country a viable investment destination for mining companies on one hand and making sure that the same country profits from its natural resource wealth on the other. That's been the focus of a conference on negotiating, financing and dispute resolution in oil and gas transactions, which has been underway in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. That event has been organized by the Negotiation and Conflict Management Group. And we're joined in studio now by its regional director, Geoffrey Njenga. Mr. Njenga, thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's talk about the question of local ownership. How can African countries encourage more and more local ownership when the structure of the capital markets really is the main limiter to getting more ownership into local hands?
Thank you very much for having me in your program. Yes, indeed. Just this evening, the International Center for Energy and CMG International and the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum have just concluded a conference, and we wanted to build capacity. As you know, big announcements have been made about oil find in the East African region, and we think it is time now to build capacity. That's what we want to do so that this region can avoid the problems which have bedeviled every other part which have discovered these resources. Talking about ownership, I think we must agree that the destiny of Africa must remain in the hands of Africans. Foreigners are in this country, are in this region to promote their interests, and you cannot blame them for that. If we will address the issue of ownership, I think we need to come up with structures, we need to come up with local funds, and in this conference we learned a lot about some local funds in Nigeria and the West African region, which have put money together to lend to African business people and African business entities which want to get into this business. Those funds will help the local companies then to source the financing which is needed for them to be able to play and to compete favorably in this very important industry. Mm-hmm. So without the help of the government and also entities which will see the need to enhance the African ownership of the business, the local ownership of business, it will be difficult because international markets are structured not to favor either small business or, let's face it, the local business community. So we want to build that capacity.
Indeed. Let's focus on one specific element of ownership. The Kenyan government last year proposed a regulation that would essentially see 35% of mining companies owned by locals over a certain period of time. Now that, however, has been changed into a 10% free carry idea, and the government in effect would be holding that 10% stake on behalf of the taxpayers. What reactions did you get to that idea at the conference?
The reaction that is coming through is that we need to come up with a negotiated position. You know, the investors in this industry, the government also investing in this industry, and the local entities investing in this industry, they want to make profit. And I think our view and what came out of this conference is that there needs to be a lot of talking so that we develop the best position possible. One would call it negotiated settlement, if you like. Mm-hmm. People need to come together so that the interests of every player in this industry is taken care of. I mean, I think days are gone when the government would make decree, because I think we are moving to a softer regime where people would need to ask the basic question. We are talking about interests, and we want to take care of the interest of every player in this industry. So our position is that, yes, some percentages have been bandied around, but I think the best position is to talk and find out what takes care of everybody's interest so that nobody feels ripped off at the end of the day.
Indeed, seeking the common denominator, as it were. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Njenga. Of course, was in reference to the question, the very, very thorny question of mine ownership and, of course, local equity participation with respect to natural resources in Africa. Let's make a quick run through the markets now for you, starting as we usually do here in Nigeria. The Nigerian all-share market, if I might remind you, has been on an absolute tear so far this year, up over 40%. It ended the day high by about a tenth today. The JSE all-share index also higher by about 2/3. Remember, of course, the question that we're looking around, especially with respect to currencies in Africa right now, is how much of the weakness we're seeing in some of these currencies is attributed to the strengthening of the dollar, especially with respect to QE being unwinded and, of course, the expectations around that. The 20-share index here in Nairobi down by about half a percentage point, a bit of a bearish run kicking in right there. And, of course, the Egyptian market closed on the day. That's BizAfrica for you this week. We'll be back on Monday.